The door crashed open with such force that the hinges nearly gave way. Marcus Blackwood stood in the doorway, his expensive suit contrasting sharply with the fury etched across his face. 7 years of bitterness had led to this moment. But as his eyes fell upon the small boy sitting at the kitchen table, a child with his exact same eyes, Marcus felt the world stop spinning. "Dad," the boy whispered, and in that single word, everything Marcus thought he knew shattered into pieces. If you've ever wondered how a single moment can change the course of a life forever, stay with me until the end. Like and subscribe to catch more stories that will touch your heart and remind you that second chances often come in unexpected packages. Marcus hadn't planned to return to the modest suburban home he once shared with Elena. The divorce had been ugly, accusations flying, hearts breaking, and ultimately, a settlement that left him financially drained but determined to rebuild. And rebuild he did. 7 years of relentless work had transformed him from a struggling entrepreneur to the CEO of a tech empire worth billions. He had everything money could buy: the penthouse overlooking the city, the collection of sports cars, the private jet. Everything except what he'd truly lost: a family. The letter that arrived at his office that morning had ignited something primal within him. Elena was requesting additional financial support, a modification to their agreement. The audacity, he thought, after she'd taken so much already. Without thinking, he'd cancelled his meetings and driven straight to the address he tried so hard to forget, ready to confront her one final time. But now, staring at the boy, 6, maybe 7 years old, Marcus felt his anger dissolve into confusion. The child had his eyes, his jawline, even the same cowlick in his dark hair that Marcus had fought with every morning of his life. "Who are you?" Marcus managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm James," the boy replied simply, returning to his homework as if strange men didn't regularly burst through their front door. "Mom says you're my dad, but you're always too busy to visit." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. It wasn't possible. They'd been divorced for 7 years, and they hadn't been intimate for months before that. Unless... The memory surfaced like a bubble breaking the water's surface. Their last night together, a desperate attempt to salvage what was already broken. Elena had reached out to him after another failed round of IVF, both of them grieving the family they thought they'd never have. One night of comfort in the storm of their failing marriage. He'd left for a business trip the next morning, and by the time he returned 2 weeks later, she had filed for divorce. "James, who's at the door?" Elena's voice called from upstairs. Marcus heard her footsteps on the stairs before she appeared, freezing when she saw him. She looked different, softer somehow, her hair shorter, but her eyes still the same warm brown that had once been his whole world. "Marcus," she breathed, instinctively moving to stand between him and the boy. "What are you doing here?" "Is he mine?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 7 years of absence. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "He's yours." The revelation sent Marcus reeling. A son. He had a son. A child he'd never known existed. A child who had been growing, learning, living just miles away from his office tower all these years. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice rising despite his effort to control it. Elena glanced at James, who was watching them with curious eyes. "James, honey, can you go play in your room for a bit? Mom needs to talk to your father." The boy nodded, gathering his papers and pencils. As he passed Marcus, he looked up with those identical eyes. "Are you staying for dinner?" "Mom's making lasagna. It's my favorite." Marcus couldn't speak, could only nod numbly as the child, his child, bounded up the stairs. When they were alone, Elena gestured toward the kitchen. "You might want to sit down," she said quietly. The kitchen was just as he remembered, the yellow walls, the mismatched chairs they'd collected from flea markets, the window over the sink that caught the afternoon light. It was like stepping back in time, except for the refrigerator door now covered with crayon drawings and school papers. "I tried to tell you," Elena began, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she'd made while Marcus sat in stunned silence. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left. I called your office, but your assistant said you were in meetings. I called your cell, but you'd changed the number." "You could have tried harder," Marcus said, but the accusation lacked conviction. Elena's eyes flashed. "You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me. Your lawyer contacted mine the day after I filed for divorce. You agreed to everything, the house, the settlement, as long as it could be done quickly and quietly. You never once asked how I was." The truth of her words stung. He had wanted out, had been so focused on rebuilding his life, his fortune, his pride, that he'd cut all ties without looking back. "I had a right to know I had a son," he said finally. "Yes," Elena admitted. "You did. And after the divorce was final, I tried again. I sent letters to your office. I even went there once, but security wouldn't let me past the lobby. Eventually, I stopped trying." She paused, studying his face. "What changed, Marcus? Why are you here now, after all this time?" Marcus pulled the letter from his pocket, tossing it onto the table between them. "You're asking for more money." Elena looked at the paper, then back at him, her expression hardening. "For James's education. He's gifted, the school recommended a special program, but it's expensive. I've been working 2 jobs to keep this house, to give him stability, but I can't afford the tuition on my own." Shame washed over Marcus as he realized what he'd done, storming in here, assuming the worst of her, when all she'd been doing was trying to provide for their son. A son he hadn't known existed until 30 minutes ago. "I'll pay for it," he said immediately. "Whatever he needs. I'll set up a trust fund, college savings." "He doesn't need your money, Marcus," Elena interrupted. "He needs a father." The words hung between them, a challenge and a truth he couldn't escape. Upstairs, they could hear James moving around, the faint sound of a toy car racing across the floor. "I don't know how to be a father," Marcus admitted, the vulnerability in his voice surprising even him. Elena's expression softened. "Nobody does at first. We figure it out as we go." "He thinks I've been too busy to visit," Marcus said, remembering James's casual comment. "Why would you tell him that?" "Because it's easier than telling a child his father doesn't know he exists," Elena replied. "I never wanted him to feel unwanted or abandoned. So I told him you work very hard, that you care about him but can't visit often. I've shown him your picture from business magazines. He knows who you are." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. Despite everything, she had given their son a version of him that was better than the reality. She had protected James from the truth that might have hurt him. "I want to know him," Marcus said suddenly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If you'll let me." Elena studied him for a long moment. "This isn't something you can dip in and out of when it's convenient, Marcus. He's not a business deal you can walk away from if it gets complicated. He's a little boy who will get attached, who will expect you to show up for baseball games and school plays and when he has nightmares." "I know," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he fully understood the commitment he was making. He only knew that he couldn't walk away again, not now that he'd seen those eyes looking back at him. "Can I start now?" he asked. "With dinner?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Lasagna will be ready in an hour." That dinner was the most awkward and the most wonderful meal of Marcus's life. James chattered about school, his friends, the model rocket he was building, while Marcus listened, trying to absorb every detail of this life he'd missed. Elena watched them cautiously, intervening occasionally to explain an inside joke or family reference Marcus wouldn't understand. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself spending more and more time at the Yellow House. He rescheduled meetings to attend James's science fair. He learned how to help with homework, how to throw a proper spiral for football practice, how to check for monsters under the bed. He learned that James was allergic to strawberries, loved dinosaurs, and had inherited not just his eyes but his aptitude for mathematics. The anger that had driven him to Elena's door that day gradually transformed into something else: regret for the time lost, gratitude for the chance to make it right, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name when he watched Elena patiently teaching James to tie his shoes or laughing at his jokes. 6 months after that first dinner, Marcus sat on the porch swing beside Elena, watching as James rode his bike up and down the sidewalk in the fading summer light. "I was so angry for so long," Marcus said quietly. "I thought you'd taken everything from me in the divorce. I never imagined what I was really missing." Elena turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the twilight. "And now?" "Now I know what matters," he replied simply. "And it's not the penthouse or the company or any of it." He reached for her hand tentatively, half expecting her to pull away. But her fingers curled around his, warm and familiar. "I'm not the same man who left 7 years ago," he said. "I know," Elena replied. "That man wouldn't have stayed for lasagna." They both laughed, and in that moment, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: the sensation of coming home. It took time, years of building trust, of proving he was there to stay, of learning to be not just a father but a co-parent. There were arguments and misunderstandings, moments when old wounds reopened. But there were also new memories being made: James's 8th birthday party, his first home run, family movie nights where they all fell asleep on the couch. On James's 10th birthday, Marcus and Elena sat side by side watching their son unwrap presents, his face alight with joy. The journey from that angry confrontation to this peaceful celebration hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. "Thank you," Marcus whispered to Elena, "for giving me a second chance to get it right." She smiled, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "Thank you for coming back, even if it was for the wrong reasons at first." Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the wrong turn can lead you exactly where you need to be. He had entered that house in anger, seeking confrontation, but found instead the greatest gift of his life: not just a son he never knew, but a chance to rebuild what truly mattered. If you've been touched by Marcus and Elena's journey of forgiveness and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us it's never too late to find your way home. Sometimes, the door we crash through in anger can be the very one that leads us back to love.